The desert stretched wide under the burning sun. Sand rolled like waves, endless and golden. Moran walked slowly across the dunes with his small team. Their boots sank into the hot ground. The air shimmered, making the horizon dance. Most would see only emptiness here, but Moran followed a signal he had found weeks before. He was not a treasure hunter. He was an explorer who studied lost places. For years he had searched for strange signals hidden deep in the earth. One signal had led him here, to this desert where old kings once ruled. The device he carried in his hand was simple, yet it pointed to something below the sand. Each step made the signal grow stronger. His team followed with heavy packs. There was Rami, who carried tools, Lena, who recorded every detail, and Omar, who kept watch with sharp eyes. They trusted Moran's instincts, for he had uncovered ruins before, though none as strange as this. By midday, they reached a ridge of stone that rose from the desert floor. Moran brushed sand away with his hands. The stone was smooth, carved long ago. He felt lines cut deep into the surface. Some were Egyptian marks, pictures of birds, suns, and eyes. Others were shapes he did not know, triangles, circles, and patterns that seemed alive. "Look at this," Moran said, his voice steady. He traced the marks with his fingers. "These are not only Egyptian. Something else was here." The team gathered close. Lena wrote in her book. Rami knelt to study the strange carvings. Omar scanned the horizon, but even he could not hide his interest. They cleared more sand until a large stone slab came into view. It was a door, wide and tall, set into the ridge. The mark stretched across its surface like a story waiting to be read. At the center of the door was a circle of gold. The sun hit the circle, and for a moment it glowed faintly. The team froze, staring. The desert wind hushed as if it too waited. "This is no tomb," Moran whispered. His heart pounded. He pressed his hand to the golden circle. The stone trembled. A low vibration passed through the sand under their feet. The desert seemed to hold its breath. With a deep groan, the door began to move. Sand poured from the edges as the slab shifted backward. The sound of stone sliding against stone echoed for a moment, then stopped. What followed was stranger still. The sound faded not into silence, but into something deeper. The world became empty of noise. The wind, the sand, even their own breathing seemed stolen. Moran opened his mouth to speak, but no voice came. His lips moved, yet no sound left. The team stared at each other, eyes wide. They tried to shout, but only silence answered. It was as if the door had swallowed every sound in the desert. Beyond the opening lay a chamber lit by a golden glow. The light came from the walls themselves. They did not shine like metal, but pulsed softly like something alive. The chamber seemed to wait for them. Moran stepped forward. His boots crunched in the sand, yet he heard nothing. It was a strange feeling, as if his senses betrayed him. Still he moved on, drawn inside. The others followed, though fear showed in their eyes. The chamber stretched far back into the rock. Its walls were covered in golden plates etched with patterns. Some looked like stars, others like rivers. At the center of the floor stood statues. They were tall, human in shape, yet not Egyptian. Their faces were smooth, without mouth or ear. In their hands they held objects like staffs or tools, but no sound came even when the explorers brushed against them. Lena reached out and touched one statue. Its surface was warm, not cold. She pulled back quickly, her eyes wide. She mouthed words to Moran, but still no voice came. Moran nodded. He understood what she meant. This place was not silent by accident. The silence was a force, thick and heavy, filling the air like water. It pressed against them, yet it did not harm them. It felt as though the chamber itself was listening. He turned back to the door. The desert sun still glowed outside, but no sound reached in from the world beyond. They were cut off, trapped in silence. Moran lifted his hand again and touched the wall. He closed his eyes, letting his thoughts focus. For a moment he felt something stir in the silence. Not a sound, but a presence. It was faint, like a whisper deep in his mind. The silence was not empty. It was alive. Moran opened his eyes and looked at his team. They were uneasy, shifting their feet, unsure if they should stay. He raised his hand, signaling for calm. His heart raced, yet a strange certainty grew inside him. They had not found a tomb of gold. They had found a vault where sound itself had no power. A place where silence ruled. Moran knew one thing with certainty. Whatever secrets lay ahead were not meant for ordinary explorers. This vault had waited centuries, maybe longer, for someone to open it, and now it was awake. The golden chamber stretched like a maze under the stone ridge. Miran and his team stood inside, their eyes wide, their mouths unable to form a single sound. It was not only quiet, it was deeper than quiet. The air swallowed everything. Even the smallest breath, the fall of a grain of sand or the beat of their hearts vanished before it reached their ears. Miran moved slowly forward. His boots pressed into the dusty floor. He could feel the steps but could not hear them. The silence seemed to press back against his body, as if it were alive and thick like water. His chest grew heavy, but he forced himself to continue. Rami tapped his shoulder and pointed toward the walls. The golden plates were covered in lines. Some were familiar hieroglyphs, shapes of birds and eyes and waves, but mixed among them were stranger designs. They twisted in curves, loops, and angles that seemed to move when one stared too long. Lena traced one line with her hand. Her eyes lit up, then narrowed in wonder. She mouthed words, but Moran shook his head. Speaking was useless here. At the far end of the chamber stood 4 tall statues. They were shaped like humans, but their faces were smooth without mouth or ear. In their hands they held rods carved with symbols. The rods pointed toward the ceiling, where a dome of gold curved overhead. Light seemed to pour from that dome, though no flame burned. It pulsed faintly like the beating of a heart. The team gathered near the statues. Omar crouched low and waved his hand in front of one face. The statue did not move, yet its eyes seemed to catch the light in a way that made them glow. Miran felt a shiver. He stepped closer. For a moment he thought he heard something. Not with his ears, but inside his mind. It was not a sound, but a faint echo, like someone standing at the edge of thought. He closed his eyes. The echo grew clearer. It was not words, but it was not empty either. Miran opened his eyes. The silence was not simple. It was a kind of language. He turned to the others. He raised his hand, then tapped his head with his finger. Omar frowned, then copied the motion. Slowly the team understood. The chamber did not use voices. It spoke through the mind. Lena knelt before one of the statues and placed both her hands on its rod. Her eyes widened. She gasped silently, though no sound came. She looked around as if she had just seen something impossible. Then she pulled back, her face pale. She pointed to the ceiling and then pressed her hand to her chest. Moran followed her gaze. The dome above them glowed brighter for a moment. Images flickered across it like smoke trapped under glass. He saw stars, ships, and vast rivers of light. The vision was brief, then gone, leaving only the steady golden glow. The silence grew heavier. It pressed harder against their thoughts. Moran could almost hear his own memory louder than before. Every moment he had lived seemed sharper. He felt as though the chamber was searching his mind, pulling pieces forward. Rami stumbled backward. His eyes darted as if he had seen something terrifying inside his head. He shook it off quickly, but the fear was clear. Omar gripped his pack straps, his knuckles white. None of them wanted to admit it, but the silence was not only listening, it was testing. Moran steadied himself. He moved closer to the nearest statue and reached out with his hand. The surface was warm. He felt energy under the golden skin like a pulse. He let his mind open, focusing not on words but on feelings. For a moment there was nothing. Then the echo returned, stronger this time. A vision flashed inside his thoughts. He saw a desert long ago filled with workers building a tomb. He saw a pharaoh standing tall, his crown shining under the sun. But beside him stood figures not of this world, tall beings with strange eyes and silent faces. They held rods like the statues. Together they carved a vault beneath the sands. A vault of silence, Moran gasped, but no sound came. His body trembled as the vision faded. He stepped back, staring at the statue. It had not moved, yet he felt sure it had given him that memory. Lena touched his arm, her eyes asking what he had seen. Moran pressed his hand to the statue again, then pointed to his head. He made the sign of a crown, then of the stars. Lena's eyes widened in sudden understanding. She nodded quickly, though her face showed both fear and awe. The team stood together under the glowing dome. They could not speak, yet they understood one thing. The silence was not empty. It was a voice older than any king, carried not by air but by thought. Moran looked once more at the statues. Their smooth faces seemed to watch him, though they did not move. He felt the weight of the silence grow even stronger, as if waiting for his next step. He knew this chamber was no tomb. It was a vault that held secrets beyond gold, a vault that listened to every thought, and it had just begun to answer. The golden chamber held its silence like a prison. Every step, every breath, every motion was swallowed whole. Miran and his team stood beneath the dome of light, surrounded by statues that stared with blank faces. None of them moved, yet their presence grew heavier the longer the explorers stayed. Miran studied the glowing walls. The patterns shifted faintly when he stared too long. At first they seemed fixed like carvings, but then the lines bent and curved, rearranging themselves into new forms. He felt dizzy as stars formed out of shapes and then melted back into spirals. Lena clutched her head as if the shifting patterns pressed against her mind. The silence was no longer simple. It carried weight, and that weight grew stronger. The team tried to resist it, but Miran could feel each of them breaking in different ways. Rami's hands shook as he looked away from the walls. Omar gripped his pack straps tighter, his eyes darting to the door as if he longed to run. Lena scribbled notes in her book, though she wrote in silence and her letters twisted across the page as if she could not control them. Then something new happened. One of the statues blinked. It was only a faint flicker of light in its eyes, but Miran saw it. He stepped closer. The eyes of all 4 statues glowed faintly in return, like embers hidden in darkness. The glow pulsed with the same rhythm as the dome above them. Miran felt his chest tighten. The silence pressed harder until he thought he might choke. But then inside his mind he heard a whisper. Not a word, not a voice, but a feeling. A question, "Who are you?" Miran staggered. The thought was not his own. It had been placed inside him by the silence itself. He glanced at his team. They were clutching their heads as well, their eyes wide. They had felt it too. He forced himself to think clearly. He answered in his mind, "We are explorers. We seek to understand." The glow in the statue's eyes grew brighter. The silence thickened, folding around him like a cloak. Then came another thought, stronger this time. "Why do you disturb the vault?" Miran tried to steady his mind. He thought of the signal that had led him here, of the markings on the stone door, of the endless sand above them. He formed the words in his mind. "We followed the signal. We were called for a moment, nothing happened. Then the golden walls rippled like water. Images formed across the surface. The team turned in awe as the walls displayed scenes of stars, battles, and fire. Great ships clashed in silence. Worlds crumbled. Golden light poured across galaxies. The explorers stared as if watching history itself. But the images moved too fast, like memories that belonged to someone else. The silence poured them into their minds without mercy. Rami collapsed to his knees. He clutched his head, his face twisted in fear. Omar pulled him up, shaking him, but no sound passed between them. Lena stared at the visions with tears in her eyes. She scribbled in her book, though the page filled with broken lines instead of words. Miran stood firm, though his legs trembled. He realized the silence was showing them what had come before. These statues were not mere guardians. They were watchers recording what had once been. The vault was a library written in silence. Then the vision stopped. The golden walls stilled, leaving only their soft glow. The silence grew heavier once more. Another thought pressed into Miran's mind. "Will you take what is not yours?" Miran looked at his team. Rami's eyes darted to a golden tablet lying near the far wall. It had not been there before, yet now it shimmered with a strange light. His hands twitched as if drawn to it. Omar shook his head, but Rami was already moving. He stumbled toward the tablet, his greed plain. Miran shouted without sound, his mouth forming words the silence swallowed. He reached out, but Rami grabbed the tablet. For an instant it glowed bright in his hands. Then in a flash of light his body turned to dust. The sand where he had stood fell in a silent heap. The tablet dropped back onto the floor untouched. The team froze. Lena covered her mouth, though no scream escaped. Omar stared in horror. Miran's chest ached with grief, but he forced himself to stay calm. The statue's eyes burned brighter. Another thought filled his mind. Only those who listen will endure. Miran understood. The silence was a trial. The vault did not want treasure seekers. It wanted guardians, people who respected what was hidden. He bowed his head, his thoughts calm and steady. "We are not here to take. We are here to learn." The silence eased. The pressure lifted slightly from his chest. The golden walls shimmered, and the dome above them glowed more warmly. Miran knew the vault was not finished with them. Rami had failed. The rest of them still faced the test. The statues watched without moving, their eyes glowing softly. The silence held its weight over the chamber, waiting for the next choice. The chamber was still after Rami's fall. His shape had turned into a pile of dust, silent and final. The golden tablet rested on the floor. untouched and glowing faintly. Omar's face was hard, his fists clenched, but he did not step forward. Lena pressed her book to her chest, her eyes wide with fear. Moran stood between them, breathing slow, keeping his mind steady. The statues did not move, yet their eyes burned brighter. The silence wrapped around the explorers again. It was no longer heavy like before. It was sharp, piercing into their thoughts like a blade. Then a voice entered their minds. It was deep, slow, and strong. Unlike the faint whispers earlier, this one carried the weight of command. I am the Pharaoh who guards silence. The words did not echo in air. They echoed in thought. The team froze, every muscle tense. Moran lifted his head, trying to calm his pounding heart. He had expected something hidden here, but not the presence of a voice that felt alive after so many ages. The Pharaoh's voice returned. I ruled when the desert was young. I walked among kings, but I saw the sky open and strangers come. They gave gold that spoke without sound. It was power greater than fire. With it, words could be stolen and secrets locked away. Images flashed across the golden dome. Ships descended from the stars. Tall beings with silent faces stepped onto the sand. The Pharaoh stood among them, his crown shining, his people kneeling in fear. They offered knowledge, the voice said, and with it, danger. My people would have broken. They would have fought, killed, and fallen. So I chose another way. I sealed their gift. I bound it in silence. The explorers stared at the glowing images. They saw workers carrying blocks of stone, carving a chamber deep under the desert. They saw rods placed in statues, golden plates fixed to the walls. They saw the Pharaoh standing beside the silent beings, his eyes grim. Moran's thoughts turned heavy. This place was not only a vault, it was a prison for something greater. The silence was not natural. It was made, shaped, controlled, the voice continued. The vault holds more than treasure. It holds knowledge too dangerous to speak. Words can build kingdoms, but words can also destroy them. This silence guards against that power. Moran looked at Lena and Omar. They listened with wide eyes, their faces pale. None of them could answer with sound, but their minds were open. The Pharaoh's voice pressed deeper into Moran's thoughts. You are human of the far future. Your kind has walked longer roads. You are not of my age. Tell me, do you seek power or truth? Moran steadied himself. He thought clearly, shaping his answer. We seek truth. We do not come to take. The silence paused. The statues glowed softly as if weighing his reply. Then the voice spoke again. The vault tests all who enter. Some fall to greed as your companion did. Others turn to fear. Only those who respect silence may hear its gift. Another vision filled the chamber. The Pharaoh stood before his people. His mouth closed, though his eyes spoke with strength. Around him, the silent beings raised their rods. A wave of silence swept across the desert, freezing voices, sealing secrets. The people bowed, unable to speak, but the Pharaoh lifted his hand to calm them. I swore my people would be safe, the voice said. I locked away the words that could bring ruin. And I remained here within silence to guard them until a time came when another could carry the burden. Moran's body shook as the vision faded. He realized the Pharaoh had not simply died. He had chosen to bind his mind to the vault itself. His body was gone, but his will lived within the silence, guiding it, shaping it. The voice turned sharp again. The vault must not fall to thieves. It must not fall to those who hunger for gold. It is more than metal. It is thought. It is power. Moran bowed his head. He let his thought speak. We understand. We will not take. We will only learn. The silence eased. The glow of the dome softened. The statues dimmed, though their eyes still watched. The Pharaoh's voice grew quiet, almost like a whisper. Then learn. But know this. Silence is a gift and a curse. It can save. It can also destroy. The chamber shifted. A path opened in the golden wall behind the statues. It led deeper into the earth, into darkness that pulsed faintly with light. The Pharaoh's voice faded, leaving only silence once more. Moran turned to his team. Omar's jaw was tight, but he nodded. Lena clutched her book, her eyes trembling yet brave. Together they stepped toward the new path. They had not only found a vault. They had been chosen to walk deeper into its heart. The golden wall slid open without a sound. Beyond it stretched a narrow passage glowing faintly, the light pulsing like the beat of a hidden heart. Moran stepped forward first, his hand brushing the wall for balance. Lena and Omar followed, their faces pale but determined. The dust where Rami had fallen remained behind them. a warning none could forget. The deeper they walked, the stronger the silence grew. It pressed against their thoughts, heavy and sharp, forcing each of them to face their own mind. There was no sound to distract, no word to escape into, only the silence and what it carried inside. The passage widened into a new chamber. It was round, with walls of gold carved in endless spirals. In the center stood a platform of stone. On it rested 3 golden tablets, each shining with a faint light. Around the platform were more statues, their faceless heads turned inward, their rods pointed at the tablets. The silence tightened until Moran thought his chest might break. Then came the Pharaoh's voice once more, deep and steady inside their minds. The vault does not give without cost. All who seek must face the trial. The glow of the tablets brightened. Visions flooded into the minds of the explorers. Moran saw himself alone in the desert holding the tablets high. Kings and nations bowed before him. He felt power surge through his veins. He could order armies, move worlds, and no one could resist. For a moment the vision tempted him. His hand twitched as if to reach, but he pulled it back, his heart steady. Power was not his purpose. Omar gritted his teeth as his own vision came. He saw himself returning home with golden riches. His family lived in comfort, never to suffer again. His heart ached. He wanted to step forward, to take what he saw. But deep inside he knew the riches were a lie. If taken, they would cost him everything. He clenched his fists and stood still. Lena fell to her knees. Her vision showed her holding the Book of Silence. Every secret in the world written inside. She could solve mysteries, write history, and her name would last forever. Her hands shook as she reached toward the tablets. But at the last moment she stopped. Her eyes filled with tears. She closed them, whispering inside her heart that knowledge was not hers to own but only to guard. The silence pressed harder, testing them. The statue's eyes glowed bright, watching every choice. Moran felt the Pharaoh's voice again. Many fall to greed. Some fall to pride. Few can see beyond themselves. Suddenly, a shadowy form rose from the platform. It shaped itself like a human, but darker. Its body made from the silence itself. It turned to Moran first. Its eyes glowed with hunger. A thought struck into his mind, sharp as a blade. You could rule all if you only take. Why refuse what is yours? Moran stood firm. He answered with calm thought. Rule means nothing if it destroys what it touches. The shadow turned to Omar. It whispered in his mind. Your family suffers. Take the gold and they will never suffer again. Omar's lips trembled, but he closed his eyes and thought with strength. To give them false comfort is no gift. They would lose more than they gain. Last, the shadow faced Lena. It poured visions into her mind. Knowledge unending, answers to every question. She gasped and clutched her head, but then she pressed her book against her chest and thought clearly. Knowledge that is stolen is poison. I will not drink it, the shadow hissed without sound. It grew weaker as each of them resisted. At last it dissolved into the silence, fading back into the golden air. The Pharaoh's voice returned. You have chosen well. Greed did not blind you. Fear did not bind you. Pride did not break you. Few endure the trial. You have shown respect to silence. The tablets on the platform dimmed. 2 vanished, leaving only 1. It glowed with a steady light, soft and warm. Step forward, the voice said. One of you must take the gift, not for power, not for riches, not for glory, but for duty. Moran looked at Omar and Lena. Both were weary, their faces pale from the visions. Yet both nodded toward him. They trusted him to carry what the vault offered. Moran stepped onto the platform. The silence thickened around him. He reached out slowly and touched the single golden tablet. The moment his fingers brushed its surface, his mind filled with stars. A map spread before him, glowing trails across the dark sky, paths of light, rivers of silence that stretched far beyond Earth. He saw worlds unknown, dangers hidden, and places where allies might be found. It was not treasure. It was knowledge of survival. The silence spoke one last time. The vault does not give gold. It gives warning. Guard it well, human, for the silence trusts you now. Moran stepped back, holding the tablet close. The platform dimmed and the statues lowered their rods. The trial was over, but he knew the journey was only beginning. The chamber did not shake or burn like other ruins that Moran had seen in his travels. It remained still and calm, yet the weight of silence pressed on every thought. The golden walls moved again, flowing like rivers of metal, and stars appeared upon them. Not stars of the night sky above Earth, but constellations unknown to the explorers. Each one burned with strange colors, moving in ways no sky map had ever shown. Moran stood at the center, his breath slow and steady. The others stayed behind him, afraid to look too long at the golden visions. The silence seemed to form a path that led only to him. He placed his hand upon his chest and whispered in his mind, asking the Pharaoh what this meant. At once, a soft current of thought returned to him. It was not a sound, but a voice inside his soul. "The silence holds maps of the stars," the Pharaoh said. "This is the treasure you seek, though no man can carry it in his hands. It is not gold that feeds greed. It is knowledge that feeds survival." Moran's eyes widened as the walls shifted again. The stars became lines, roads drawn through endless black. He understood that they were star routes. Some were glowing bright, while others were broken and dim, as if warning of dangers. The Pharaoh's presence guided him closer. "These maps show places where my people once walked," the Pharaoh's voice explained. "Some places hold allies who may remember kindness. Others hold enemies who remember war. Humans will meet them one day. You must be ready." Moran felt the weight of history inside those words. The Pharaoh had locked away this knowledge so no voice could misuse it. That was why the silence was chosen. If spoken, lies could twist it. If written, greed could claim it. Only thought could pass it on, and only to those who were willing to listen with patience. The explorers behind him grew restless. One of them, a man named Roulan, frowned and whispered to another, "We came all this way for star pictures? What use are they? We cannot sell stars. We cannot trade them. This is no treasure." The silence reacted to Roulan's greed. The golden walls dimmed and a wave of cold ran through the room. The Pharaoh's presence turned sharp like a blade. Moran raised his hand quickly and stepped forward. "Wait," he said, though his words vanished. He thought the rest instead. "He does not understand. Do not punish him. He is blind to the truth, but I see it." The cold eased, though the walls did not brighten again until Moran placed both hands on the golden surface. The Pharaoh's thought voice returned, calmer than before. "You are human, yet you listen. That is why the silence trusts you. The maps belong not to your hands, but to your people's future." Moran felt a strange warmth flow into his mind. It was not knowledge like numbers or names, but a deep memory of paths, directions, and warnings. The maps wrote themselves into his thoughts as if carved by light. He knew he could not forget them. The silence itself had become part of him. He turned back to the others. Though no voice carried, his eyes spoke with strength. They saw something in him that was not there before. The fear that once made them tremble now eased. Even Roulan lowered his head, ashamed of his words. They all understood that Moran had been chosen to carry the gift. The Pharaoh's voice grew softer, almost fading. "Take this silence with you. It will guide you in times of doubt. Remember that true power is not spoken. True power listens. One day your people will stand before the same choice I once faced. Will you bind danger or will you unleash it? That choice belongs to humans now." The golden walls grew still. The stars faded. Only smooth shining metal remained. The silence pressed again, but this time it did not feel heavy. It felt like a companion walking beside them. Moran turned toward the exit. His steps were slow, for he knew this was not just the end of a discovery, but the beginning of a burden. He carried no golden statues, no treasure to display. But within him lived the voice of the Pharaoh and the path of countless stars. As the explorers followed him, one of them, a woman named Alira, thought softly in the silence. "Moran, are we safe now?" He looked back at her, his expression calm. "We are not safe," he replied in thought, "but we are ready." With that, they began the long walk back toward the stone door, knowing that the desert outside waited. Yet none of them felt empty. They had entered searching for gold that spoke no words, and they were leaving with silence that spoke louder than any sound. The desert air struck them as they stepped out of the stone vault. It felt heavy and hot after the strange calm of the golden chamber. Sand stretched endless before them, dunes rolling like waves of a silent sea. Behind them, the massive stone door began to sink back under the weight of shifting sand, as if the earth itself wished to hide the vault again. Moran paused and turned his head. He watched as the last glimpse of golden light vanished behind the sealed doorway. A part of him wanted to reach out, but he knew the silence had given him what he needed. It would not open again for them. Perhaps it would wait centuries before it chose another. The explorers gathered around him, each face marked with awe and unease. None of them carried treasure. Their hands were empty, yet their hearts were full of questions. Rulon looked frustrated, his eyes scanning the dunes. "We have nothing to show the world," he said, voice trembling. "Who will believe us? Who will listen when we tell them we found maps of stars hidden in silence?" Miran raised his head toward the sky. The sun glared bright above, but he imagined the stars waiting beyond the blue. The memory of those maps burned in his mind, carved so deep they could never be lost. "They do not need to believe us now," Miran answered softly. "What matters is that the path exists. One day humanity will walk it." The group set out across the sand, their steps slow but steady. Hours passed as the desert tested them with heat and thirst, yet none complained as much as before. They felt the weight of the silence with them, not as a curse but as a shield. By the time they reached their camp, the sky had shifted into night. Stars shimmered above, countless and bright. Miran stood apart from the others, his eyes following the patterns in the sky. He traced lines only he could see, remembering which paths glowed bright in the vault and which were broken with danger. For the first time, the stars felt alive to him. They were not far fires, but roads waiting to be walked. Illyra joined him quietly. She carried no greed in her eyes, only calm wonder. "Miran," she asked, "do you think the Pharaoh trusted you alone? Or did he trust all of us?" Miran thought for a moment. The silence pressed gently at the edge of his mind, guiding his reply. "He trusted silence to choose. It chose me to carry the map, but it trusted all of us to witness. You saw the test. Only one failed when he reached for treasure. The rest of us listened. That was enough." She nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the stars. "Then we must not waste what was given." The days that followed were filled with travel back across the desert. They faced storms, heat, and exhaustion, yet something within them carried them forward. They knew they were not just returning with stories of an old pharaoh. They carried warnings, maps, and hope. When at last they reached the city, their return stirred little excitement. Few believed in hidden vaults or golden silence. Some mocked their tale. Others demanded proof of treasure. But Miran did not argue. He let their words fall, for he carried silence within him, and silence did not need to fight with noise. In the weeks that passed, he began to draw the star paths on old charts. He worked in secret, careful to keep the knowledge safe. He taught only those who could listen without greed. Slowly, a small circle of men and women learned the roots, memorizing them as he had. None of them understood all the meanings, but they felt the importance of what had been given. At night, Miran would stand beneath the sky. He whispered in his thoughts, not with his voice, to the presence that once filled the vault. He did not know if the Pharaoh still listened, but he spoke anyway. "Your silence is safe. Humanity will walk the stars. We will not be blind when the time comes." One evening, as the stars burned brighter than ever before, Illyra came to him again. She asked, "Miran, what if we are not ready? What if the enemies in those broken paths reach us first?" Miran closed his eyes. He remembered the Pharaoh's last words. True power was not spoken, true power listened. He placed his hand on her shoulder and said, "If they come, we will listen first. That is our strength. It will be enough." The wind carried across the city, soft but steady, almost like the hush of the vault itself. For a moment, Miran thought he heard the silence again, not as emptiness, but as a promise. The Pharaoh's gift was not gold, not jewels, not weapons. It was a voice that spoke without sound, guiding those who would listen. Humanity had entered the vault with empty hands, but it had left with a future. Miran lifted his eyes to the stars. He did not fear them anymore. He saw not darkness, but paths waiting to be walked. The silence had given humanity a voice, and that voice would one day be heard across the endless sky.